Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are here to help you gain knowledge quickly, but thoroughly, pulling surprising facts and profound insights from some really complex source material.
And today we are really opening a window into the mind of someone, truly one of the most intense figures of 18th century American religious history.
That's right, David Brainerd.
Yeah.
But we're not looking at, the grand success of his later work just yet.
No, not at all.
We're looking at the agonizing internal preparation, the forge of the soul, really, that came before it all.
The crucible.
Exactly. This deep dive is centered on the summary of the life of Reverend David Brainerd, chiefly extracted from his diary by President Edwards, Chapter 4.
A fascinating and, frankly, a very difficult chapter.
It is. And as always, this summary is created with the help of AI, but it is instructed to stay very close to the chapter. We're going to be charting about 4 months, November 1742 through March 1743.
Right. This is the period right between his official appointment as a missionary and his actual deployment to the Indians at Conamique.
And it is a period that's just defined by, well, spiritual chaos, and then finally, resolution.
What's so fascinating to me here is that he has his orders. The commission is in his hand. Normally, that would be a moment of triumph, maybe some public recognition.
You'd think so, yeah.
But this is not a period of smooth planning, not at all. This transitional time, as you said, it serves as an absolute spiritual crucible for him. The commitment's been made, and now his soul has to sort of catch up to the enormity of the task.
The enormity and the danger.
The danger, absolutely.
So our mission for you, the listener, today is this. We are going to move through Brainerd's own words. We're going to try to understand the daily and sometimes the hour-by-hour mental and spiritual landscape of a man preparing for a calling he absolutely knew might cost him his life.
And we want to grasp these emotional extremes because he didn't just see them as side effects.
Right.
He saw them as necessary preparation for an effective ministry.
It's an essential text, really, for understanding that whole Puritan concept of preparationism.
It is. The idea that the spirit has to be, utterly broken down and then reconstructed before it can be truly useful to God.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's unpack this with his very first entry in this critical period. It's November 26. He's just received this high honor, but his immediate response, it's not pride. It's not celebration.
It's the exact opposite.
It's radical self-abnegation, he wrote. Had still a sense of my great vileness and endeavored as much as I could to keep alone. Oh, what a nothing! What dust and ashes am I! Enjoyed some peace and comfort in spreading my complaints before the God of all grace.
That phrase, great vileness, that's the starting point for his entire process here.
It's so jarring to a modern ear.
It is, but for Brainerd and, the Puritan theology that Edwards champions, any true move toward God had to begin with this agonizing awareness of your own sin, your own inadequacy.
So if he felt worthy.
If he felt worthy, he'd be relying on his own strength. And that, in his mind, would be the ultimate spiritual disaster.
Which is why he wants to keep alone.
Exactly. Solitude was essential for this kind of brutal self-examination.
It's just such a remarkable contrast to, modern self-help philosophy, which is all about building self-esteem and positive affirmation before you take on a big task.
Right.
Brainerd's self-esteem here seems to be at absolute zero, yet somehow he finds peace in that. How does that peace get generated from such despair?
Well, the peace is found only in that external anchor.
Spreading my complaints before the God of all grace.
Exactly. The comfort doesn't come from inside him. It's the relief he feels when he transfers the burden. The whole weight of his failure and his vileness, he's putting it onto divine mercy.
So his self-contempt is actually the tool.
It's the mechanism. It's the mechanism that forces him into total dependence. And it's in that dependence that he finds rest. This is the absolute cornerstone of his spiritual discipline.
And he immediately takes that acute internal suffering, and he takes it on the road with him. The very next day, November 27th, he leaves New York, rides 30 miles to White Plains.
And the journey itself isn't just a physical trip.
No, it's an extension of this whole internal spiritual exercise. He says, committed my soul to God with some degree of comfort, left New York about 9 in the morning, came away with a distressing sense still of my unspeakable unworthiness. Surely I may well love all my brethren, for none of them all is so vile as I.
Stop there for a second. That line is just, it's incredible. He believes none of them, none of his fellow Christians are so vile as I.
He continues, whatever they do outwardly, yet it seems to me none is conscious of so much guilt before God. Oh, my leanness, my barrenness, my carnality and past bitterness and want of a gospel temper. These things oppress my soul.
You can just feel the extraordinary psychological weight this man is carrying. He doesn't just feel
And
guilty,
he feels uniquely guilty.
uniquely vile. This is that doctrine of indwelling sin, this
Nice.
persistent, powerful corruption that, in their view, remains even in the most regenerated heart. He looks at his friends, his peers, and he concludes that no one else can possibly know the depth of corruption he sees inside himself.
And he lists them out, his specific shortcomings: leanness, barrenness, carnality, and that phrase, the want of a gospel temper. For you, the listener, who might not be familiar with this kind of language, what exactly do they mean by gospel temper in the 18th century?
That is such a crucial piece of jargon. A gospel temper refers to the internalized disposition that perfectly mirrors the grace and humility of Christ.
So it's not just about doing Christian things.
No, it's not about performance. It's about possessing the fundamental sweetness, the patience, the love, the detachment that the gospel is supposed to produce in a person. So when Brainerd says he lacks it, he means his natural inclination is selfish and angry and impatient.
So the bitterness he mentions is the direct opposite of the gospel's sweetness.
Precisely. And he perceives these internal flaws as a physical weight, something that, oppresses his soul.
So the rest of his journey, he says he continued lifting up my heart to God for mercy and purifying grace, and spent the evening much dejected in spirit.
It's exhausting just reading it.
It really is. So he's turning this mundane act of riding 30 miles into a relentless hours-long prayer meeting. I mean, how long could a person actually sustain that kind of agonizing introspection?
And that is precisely the question. But for him, the physical journey had to mirror the spiritual striving, the commitment to constant, deep engagement, not allowing your mind to just rest in neutral. That was the sign of a truly serious believer in that era.
So it's exhausting, but it's purposeful.
Yes, it's exhausting, but it serves a very specific purpose. It prevents complacency and it forces a continual, moment-by-moment reliance on grace.
And then just 4 days later, we see this rapid shift that really defines his diary, a massive spike of spiritual relief. December 1st, the despair is just gone, replaced by total resolution.
The whiplash is incredible.
He writes, "My soul breathed after God in sweet spiritual and longing desires of conformity to him, and was brought to rest itself on his rich grace, and felt strength and encouragement to do or suffer anything that divine providence should allot me."
And there it is. That's the cyclical pattern we see over and over in his life. The depth of the despair ensures that when comfort does arrive, he recognizes it as purely external, purely divine grace.
So he goes from being dust and ashes
To feeling strength and encouragement to do or suffer anything. The swing isn't instability, not in his view. It's the engine of his faith. He is prepared to face physical danger, to suffer anything, only because he has first faced and overcome the most profound internal danger.
which is self-reliance.
Self-reliance, exactly.
Just an incredibly high-stakes way to live. Treating every single emotional fluctuation as a direct indicator of divine favor or disfavor. But you're right, it certainly ensures he feels prepared for the field.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving into the middle of December, Brainerd undertakes this journey that includes a really crucial philanthropic decision and some powerful spiritual fellowship. He's near his hometown of Haddam, traveling into western Connecticut. And on December 11th, we get this peek into his practical stewardship of his money.
Which is so significant given that he's about to become a missionary living on the frontier with basically no guaranteed income.
He writes, "Conversed with the dear friend to whom I had thought of giving a liberal education and being at the whole charge of it, that he might be fitted for the gospel ministry. I acquainted him with my thoughts on the subject, and so left him to consider of it."
So he's not just thinking about it, he's actively setting it in motion.
Right. And then he says, "Then I rode to Bethlehem, came to Mr. Bellamy's lodgings, and spent the evening with him in sweet conversation and prayer. We commended the concern of sending my friend to college to the God of all grace. Blessed be the Lord for this evening's opportunity together."
This action, on the surface it seems simple, but it is profoundly radical when you put it in context. And this is where we have to bring in the observations from Jonathan Edwards, who was Brainerd's editor.
The editor of the diary.
Right. Edwards confirms that Brainerd, who had an inheritance from his father, he judged that, and I'm quoting Edwards here, there was no way in which he could spend it more for the glory of God than by being at the charge of educating some young man of talents and piety for the ministry.
But wait a minute. That's a massive risk, isn't it? He is about to face a highly dangerous, isolating frontier life. It's full of hardship, probable sickness. Why would he dispense with his financial security right before he deploys?
Because for Brainerd, his mission was total. It was total consecration. Holding on to his estate for his own personal comfort would have demonstrated, in his mind, a lack of faith in divine providence.
So by dedicating his own money to training another minister.
He was showing that his priority was the kingdom, not his own survival or comfort. And those funds were used right up until Brainerd's death. They educated this young man through his 3rd year of college. It's just this powerful testament to him prioritizing spiritual impact over earthly security.
And he formalizes it through prayer with a respected peer, Mr. Bellamy. He's sanctifying the decision.
Yes, and that sense of fellowship is key. Because the very next day, Sunday, December 12th, is a profoundly memorable Sabbath for him, and it demonstrates this direct link between his willingness to sacrifice everything and his ability to experience what he sees as profound spiritual reality.
He starts the day weak, though. He reports, "I felt in the morning as if I had little or no power either to pray or preach, and felt a distressing need of divine help. I went to meeting trembling."
He's emptied out again.
But in the service, the shift is just dramatic. He says, "But it pleased God to assist me in prayer and sermon. I think my soul scarce ever penetrated so far into the immaterial world in any one prayer that I ever made, nor were my devotions ever so free from gross conceptions and imaginations framed from beholding material objects."
Okay, that line, penetrated so far into the immaterial world, that is absolutely central to understanding Brainerd's spiritual ideal.
It sounds very abstract.
It is, and it speaks directly to the debates that were happening during the Great Awakening. Many of the, excesses of the revival, the shouting, the physical trembling, the big emotional displays, they were criticized by more orthodox figures like Edwards.
Because they relied too much on sensory experience.
Exactly, on material objects. So when Brainerd says his prayer was free from gross conceptions, what does that mean in practical terms for you listening today?
It sounds like he achieved a kind of worship that was purely of the mind and spirit.
That's it exactly. He wasn't needing imaginative pictures of heaven or some kind of emotional fervor to feel God's presence. He was experiencing this abstract, pure apprehension of divine truth. It's intellectual and spiritual communion, unmediated by physical sense. And for him, this was the highest state of spiritual maturity.
So his struggles had actually refined him.
Yes. They'd refined him away from relying on those fleeting emotional high points and toward genuine spiritual understanding.
He then preaches 2 powerful sermons. One on seeking the kingdom first, and later that day, he confirms this refining process in his diary.
A really key entry.
He writes, "This has been a sweet Sabbath to me, and blessed be God, I have reason to think that my religion has become more spiritual by means of my late inward conflicts. Amen. May I always be willing that God should use his own methods with me."
This is the moment of acceptance. He is actively embracing the pain that came before it. He realizes the conflict wasn't a punishment.
It was a tool.
A divine tool, yes.
Yeah.
It's an essential lesson for him. He recognizes that the methods God uses, even the most painful periods of self-doubt, are necessary to purify his faith, to make it more spiritual and robust for the incredibly arduous task that's ahead of him.
And he applies that rigorous focus just 2 days later, on December 14th. But he turns his attention outward, to the state of the church.
That's right, he's concerned.
Some perplexity hung on my mind. I was distressed last night and this morning for the interests of Zion, especially on account of the false appearances of religion that do but rather breed confusion, especially in some places.
That's so interesting.
He then preaches in a town called Southbury, and he says he endeavored with tenderness to undermine false religion.
This highlights the deep skepticism that was spreading after the first wave of the Great Awakening. Brainerd was a staunch revivalist, make no mistake.
But he was also worried about authenticity.
He was acutely aware that intense emotional experiences could sometimes mask a lack of genuine, transformative piety. And because he struggled so deeply with his own authenticity, he was uniquely sensitive to any hint of superficiality in other people.
It must have required incredible tact to challenge people's faith without just shutting them down. I noticed that phrase with tenderness.
That's key. His goal was not to condemn, but to redirect. He wanted people to rely on the steadfast spiritual reality of God, the one he had just accessed in his immaterial world prayer, rather than relying on temporary emotional enthusiasm.
The final entry in this section, December 15th, details a very solemn farewell. The spiritual focus now is characterized by this profound, peaceful goodwill toward everyone.
He's found that gospel temper he was looking for?
It seems so. He says he enjoyed something of God today. felt much of the sweetness of religion and the tenderness of the gospel temper. I found a dear love to all mankind, and was much afraid lest some motion of anger or resentment should, from time to time, creep into my heart.
This is the practical manifestation of it. This ability to feel dear love to all mankind and to maintain this vigilant guard against anger. So when he left, the farewell wasn't just, sentimental. It was grimly realistic.
And Edwards confirms this in his notes.
Yes. Edwards confirms that the solemn manner of their parting was due to the gravity of his mission. The commissioners had designated him for the Indians living near the forks of the Delaware and Susquehanna River.
A very remote and dangerous place.
Extremely.
Yeah.
So considering, as Edwards puts it, the distance of those places and his probable exposure to many hardships and dangers, both Brainerd and his friends rightly supposed they might not meet again.
Until eternity.
Right. This wasn't melodrama. It was the measured, sober expectation of frontier life in the 1740s.
That understanding that this might be the last time they ever saw each other, it lends incredible weight to his final phrase, "I doubt not, but through grace, some of us shall have a happy meeting there."
The sacrifice is now fully externalized. It's accepted. He's ready.
Or so it seems, because now we transition into the period that truly defines the emotional volatility of his preparation.
Yes, the jump from this profound assurance to a devastating existential crisis, sometimes within a matter of days.
This radical oscillation,
Yeah.
it's crucial to analyze because it really shows the immense internal pressures he was under, trying to maintain spiritual equilibrium while he's preparing for utter isolation.
It's the calm before the storm and then the storm itself.
Right. On December 23rd and 27th, we see those moments of profound closeness, which seem to confirm his readiness.
The spiritual highs.
He writes, "Enjoyed, I trust, the presence of God this morning in secret. Oh, how divinely sweet is it to come into the secret of his presence and abide in his pavilion." That's December 23rd.
A moment of pure comfort.
And then just 4 days later, enjoyed a precious season indeed, had a melting sense of divine things, of the pure spirituality of the religion of Christ Jesus. He preaches in the evening and says he did so with much freedom, power, and pungency. Oh, the sweetness, the tenderness I felt in my soul. If ever I felt the temper of Christ, I had some sense of it now. Blessed be my God, I have seldom enjoyed a more comfortable and profitable day than this.
You see his criteria for success there. It's God's presence, the realization of pure spirituality, and a tangible sense of Christ's temper.
Not just the idea of it, but the feeling of it.
Not just intellectual assent, no, the felt disposition. These are his moments of spiritual validation. The proof that the preceding vileness and confession had been accepted, they fuel him.
But they also set up the dramatic collapse that follows.
Exactly.
And that collapse hits so hard on January 14th, 1743. It's more than just a low mood. It's an existential and theological void, and he describes it with almost physical force.
It's one of the most intense passages in the whole diary.
My spiritual conflicts today were unspeakably dreadful, heavier than the mountains and overflowing floods. I was deprived of all sense of God, even of the being of a God, and that was my misery.
Just devastating.
I find that language just shocking. Deprived of all sense, even of the being of a God. What is the theological mechanism at work here that could cause such an immediate and complete void?
This is what theologians would call the experience of the privation of God.
Privation.
Right, the privatio boni. The traditional theological understanding is that God is the source of all being, all good, all joy. So to be deprived of all sense of God is to be plunged into a kind of non-existence, or at least a conscious, agonizing awareness of your own fundamental dependency with nothing to depend on.
So when he says the conflict was heavier than the mountains,
He's describing the removal of the very foundation of his reality. His sense of purpose, of meaning, of security, it just vanishes.
and he draws a chilling, definitive conclusion from this low point. A conclusion about the nature of eternal punishment.
It's a terrifying insight for him.
He says, the torments of the damned, I am sure, will consist much in a privation of God, and consequently of all good. This taught me the absolute dependence of a creature upon God, the Creator, for every crumb of happiness it enjoys.
So this experience for Brainerd, it was a direct, albeit temporary, taste of hell. Hell isn't just fire and brimstone in this view.
It's this void.
It is the total, the irreversible spiritual void that he experienced that day. And this insight refines his mission. He's not just going out to teach ethics or doctrine.
No, he's going to save people from this ultimate horror.
The horror of conscious, unending dependency without a source to depend on.
This realization leads to one of the most powerful and I mean, almost absurdly humble comparisons in the entire chapter. It just demonstrates his absolute reliance on the Creator for any sense of worth.
It's an incredible image.
He says, oh, I feel that if there is no God, though I might live forever here and enjoy not only this but all other worlds, I should be 10,000 times more miserable than a reptile.
Let's just pause and think about that statement. 10,000 times more miserable than a reptile. Why a reptile?
I was wondering that myself.
Because the reptile operates purely on instinct. It's innocent of conscious spiritual awareness. Brainerd is saying that a sentient being, a person who is intelligent enough to recognize their fundamental need for the source of all good, yet exists consciously without it. That person is worse off than the lowest creature that possesses neither that intelligence nor that spiritual need.
So what this gives us as a takeaway today is that Brainerd realized that chasing external validation, even something as hyperbolic as possessing all other worlds, it's completely meaningless if that internal existential anchor is missing.
It makes the entire material world, even the whole cosmos, seem utterly secondary to that internal spiritual connection.
And this realization, this dependency, it makes the next low point even more agonizingly acute.
If that's even possible.
Less than 2 weeks later, January 23rd, he hits the personal extreme of this despair. He now views himself as utterly unfit for his own mission.
The self-loathing is just overwhelming.
He says, I scarce ever felt myself so unfit to exist as now. Saw I was not worthy of a place among the Indians, where I'm going if God permits. Thought I should be ashamed to look them in the face, and much more to have any respect shown me there. Indeed, I felt myself banished from the earth, as if all places were too good for such a wretch.
Think about that. He's preparing to evangelize a group of people who colonial society often viewed as, less civilized, as savages.
Right.
Yet he considers himself unworthy to even stand among them. How do we reconcile that level of self-contempt with the kind of confidence you would need for leadership in a dangerous, cross-cultural setting?
It seems like a paradox.
It is the paradox that Edward so admired. In the Puritan framework, true spiritual strength is birthed from the complete absence of self-worth. If Brainerd had gone out feeling qualified, powerful, or confident in his own abilities,
or even feeling superior to the Indians he was supposed to serve,
his mission would have been compromised by pride. Instead, he felt that every place, every creature was superior to him. He had to be emptied entirely of himself so that, in his view, divine power could flow through him unobstructed.
But if his emotional state is swinging so wildly between total elation and deep despair, how do we differentiate this purely spiritual testing from what we might today call, say, clinical depression?
That's an excellent critical question.
Does the 18th century view leave any room for external factors, or is everything just strictly categorized as a spiritual frame?
Right. The 18th century lens largely lacked our modern psychological categories. They viewed such intense emotional fluctuation through a strictly theological prism. It was the activity of the devil, or the battle against indwelling sin, or a purposeful test from God.
But Edwards himself acknowledged that these things often manifested physically.
He did. And what Brainerd is describing, the deep dejection, the physical oppression, it certainly looks like what we would now classify as severe depression. The crucial difference, though, in Brainerd's experience is that these lows always lead to a profound theological insight.
They're productive in a way.
They're productive. They lead to the realization of the privation of God or the necessity of humility. They serve a clear, refining purpose in his narrative, propelling him toward a resolution rather than just, stagnation. It's an example of a spiritual rigor that may very well have coexisted with physical or chemical realities we'd recognize today.
He takes that self-contempt even further, stating he was unworthy of even the lowest place on earth.
The language gets more and more extreme.
I thought I should be ashamed to go among the very savages of Africa. I appeared to myself a creature fit for nothing, neither heaven nor earth.
And that final self-assessment, fit for nothing, neither heaven nor earth, that is the ultimate prerequisite for radical service in his mind. Having been annihilated internally, he is now ready to risk annihilation externally because he has nothing left to lose. He's already discarded the self he started with.
He concludes this whole section with a clear definition of his suffering, and he links it directly back to that theological breakthrough he had.
He sums it up perfectly.
None know but those who feel it, what the soul endures that is sensibly shut out from the presence of God. Alas, it is more bitter than death.
And that reiterates his conviction. Spiritual separation is the ultimate torment. He has experienced the bitterness of death, as he says, without the physical release of dying. And it's this intimate knowledge of what he considers ultimate suffering that gives him the authority and the urgency for his mission.
Which brings us to a practical intervention. The mission was set, the spiritual preparation was complete, but the physical world demanded a delay.
Right. The severe winter made immediate travel and starting his work just impossible. So he was granted leave by the commissioners to spend some weeks at East Hampton on Long Island.
Contextualizing this practical reality is really crucial, isn't it? His radical spiritual state had to temporarily yield to the climate and the logistical constraints of the 18th century frontier.
He needed a place to consolidate, to let his inner strength kind of settle while he waited for the weather to break.
So on February 2nd, he preaches a farewell sermon at the home of an aged man and sets out. 10 days later, at East Hampton, he starts to find a new equilibrium, and it's marked by this really important word, composure.
A huge shift from the chaos of January.
He writes, enjoyed a little more comfort, was enabled to meditate with some composure of mind, and especially in the evening, found my soul more refreshed in prayer than at any time of late. My soul seemed to take hold of God's strength and was comforted with his consolations. Oh, how sweet are some glimpses of divine glory, how strengthening and quickening.
Composure. It's such a stark contrast to the mountainous dread he was talking about before. He's no longer just being swept away by his emotions.
He's actively taking hold of God's strength.
Exactly. It suggests an active intellectual effort to anchor himself, rather than passively waiting for some emotional relief to show up. This marks a shift from frantic striving to a kind of resolved action.
And the suffering has burned something away.
It's burned away his spiritual arrogance, and the resulting peace is more stable. And this composure then naturally leads to the necessary missionary mindset, detachment.
Right. On February 15th, he details walking into a grove and achieving this profound sense of distance from the world.
A key moment.
Early in the day, I felt some comfort. Afterward, I walked into a neighboring grove and felt more as a stranger on earth, I think, than ever before, dead to any of the enjoyments of the world.
A stranger on earth.
In the evening had divine sweetness and secret duty. God was then my portion, and my soul rose above those deep waters into which I've sunk so low of late.
That feeling of being a stranger on earth and dead to any of the enjoyments of the world, that is so vital. This is the ultimate freedom from attachment, right?
It has to be.
It is absolute freedom. It means he is losing his reliance on physical comfort, his hopes for a good reputation, his fear of isolation. A missionary going into the wilderness needs this deep detachment. If you're tied to the world, every hardship will feel like a fatal blow.
But because he's risen above the deep waters of his distress,
he can now face the external wilderness knowing his true portion, his true home, lies elsewhere. The internal agony served as the mechanism to sever his ties to earthly desire.
On February 17th, he preaches with freedom, boldness, and some power in a small village. And later that night, he has a truly remarkable conversation with a Christian friend. And it leads to what I think is the intellectual breakthrough of the chapter.
This is the apex of his learning from this whole experience.
He says they had an evening conversation with a dear Christian friend and felt serious as on the brink of eternity. Our interview was truly a little emblem of heaven itself. I find my soul is more refined and weaned from a dependence on my frames and spiritual feelings.
There it is. He explicitly states that he is weaned from a dependence on my frames and spiritual feelings. This is the ultimate victory over the emotional volatility of the preceding month.
Okay, so to clarify that jargon for you, the listener, we really need to understand the function of frames. Brainerd's frames were his internal thermostat.
Yeah.
Sometimes joyous, sometimes desolate. So he's saying he no longer trusts the thermometer.
That is a perfect analogy. He realized that relying on the feeling of closeness to God, his spiritual frame, was just as precarious and unreliable as relying on his own worthiness or self-esteem.
It's like constantly checking the stock price of a company.
Instead of trusting the long-term fundamentals of that company, exactly, Brainerd moves from relying on his daily emotional performance, which is the frame, to relying on the rock-solid, unchanging character of God, regardless of whether he feels miserable or joyous.
And that's what makes his service sustainable.
That's the only thing that could make it sustainable.
This profound stability leads directly into his longing for permanence in his dedication on February 18th.
You can see the shift in his prayers.
Had some enjoyment most of the day and found access to the throne of grace. Oh, that I might be serious, solemn, and always vigilant while in an evil world. Had some opportunity alone today and found some freedom in study. Oh, I long to live to God.
And the following 2 weeks, which Edwards just summarizes without quoting all the daily entries, they confirm the sustained shift. This period was largely defined by, as Edwards puts it, spiritual peace and comfort.
So he wasn't idle during this waiting period?
Not at all. The time was filled with earnest service. Study, prayer, meditation, preaching, private instruction. This continuous engagement with his duties, even while he's in a holding pattern, demonstrates the fruit of all that self-examination.
So the volatility has been replaced by something else.
It's been replaced by a structured, productive piety. The agonizing internal battle has now produced a disciplined missionary who is ready to begin his work. The winter stay wasn't a delay.
It was a necessary incubation period for that foundational stability.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the final comprehensive consecration. The total surrender before he finally steps into the work. March 7th is the real apex of his preparation. It summarizes everything he's learned over the winter.
The final resolution.
This morning when I rose, I found my heart go forth after God in longing desires of conformity to him, and in secret prayer found myself sweetly quickened and drawn out in praises to God for all he had done to and for me, and for all my inward trials and distress of late.
And the spiritual accounting is now complete. He is not just enduring suffering. He is explicitly praising God for the suffering, for all my inward trials and distress of late.
He sees the suffering as a necessary mechanism.
He's confirming the divine wisdom and refining him through fire. He gets it now.
And he powerfully accepts all future suffering, completing this cycle of submission and radical acceptance.
This is the part that is just so stunning.
My heart ascribed glory, glory, glory to the blessed God.
Wow.
And bid welcome to all inward distress again, if God saw meet to exercise me with it.
I mean, moving from dreading distress to actively bidding it welcome, that is a colossal psychological and spiritual leap.
And this profound acceptance, it alters his perspective on mortality and time itself. He writes, "Time appeared but an inch long, and eternity at hand."
And if time is reduced to just an inch, then all the hardships and dangers inherent in his mission, the isolation, the illness, the potential violence, all of that is contained within a single brief moment. This perspective just neutralizes the terror of the frontier. He sees the finish line of eternity so clearly.
The resolve is total. He's drawing on the strength that he gained from this vision.
You can hear it in his voice.
I thought I could, with patience and cheerfulness, bear anything for the cause of God. For I saw that a moment would bring me to a world of peace and blessedness. My soul, by the strength of the Lord, rose far above this lower world and all the vain amusements and frightful disappointments of it.
He has achieved genuine spiritual transcendence. He's rising above the frightful disappointments that so often plague human ambition. He is truly, internally prepared to face anything the mission field might throw at him.
And this deep resolve is so critical because the very next week, he gives his final parting advice before he deploys.
His farewell sermon.
Right. On Sunday, March 13th, he preaches his farewell message at East Campton. And despite this initial physical weakness, he thought it was impossible for me to preach. He delivers a sermon that lasted nearly an hour and a half.
90 minutes. Incredible.
In the first prayer, I was so weak that I could scarcely stand. But in the sermon, God strengthened me, so that I spake near an hour and a half with sweet freedom, clearness, and some tender power, from Genesis 5.24. And Enoch walked with God.
And the message itself, Enoch walking with God, that is Brainerd's ultimate parting word. He's insisting on a close, continuous, conscious communion with God.
The very close walk with God that he had struggled so desperately to attain all winter.
It's a perfect synthesis of his entire preparation process.
He leaves East Hampton the next day, grieving and rejoicing simultaneously, a mix of human affection and divine calling. He travels to New York, finds sweetness in conversation and prayer with a Mr. Burr in Newark, preaches there, and he concludes with that enduring missionary aspiration.
The ultimate goal.
Oh, when shall I come to that blessed world where every power of my soul will be incessantly and eternally wound up in heavenly employments and enjoyments to the highest degree?
That longing for total, uninterrupted devotion, it marks his final psychological readiness. But here, right here, this transcendent spiritual focus slams directly into the immediate, messy reality of the 18th century frontier.
The real world intervenes again.
Big time. On Monday, he met with the correspondents in Woodbridge, New Jersey. These are the commissioners overseeing his deployment. And they made a last-minute, crucial, external decision. His original destination, the forks of the Delaware River, was now deemed untenable.
A sudden change of plans. After all this preparation and commitment to that specific location, what forced them to redirect him?
The reasons were entirely pragmatic and, you could say, political, as detailed in the source material. First, information reached the commissioners about serious contention between white settlers and the Indians on the Delaware concerning land ownership.
A land dispute.
A land dispute. And they rightly supposed that this underlying tension and distrust would inevitably hinder any missionary success. It would distract the Indians and create an environment of hostility.
That makes sense. And what was the second reason?
Second, they had received favorable reports from a Mr. Sargent, who was the missionary at Stockbridge. He told them about the hopeful spiritual prospect of a smaller group of Indians already residing at a place called Conomeek.
And where was that?
It was a location situated in the woods between Stockbridge and Albany, New York, a different region entirely.
So after conquering all these mountainous internal conflicts, the vileness, the despair, the fear of death, his physical deployment is redirected by the very messy, real-world issue of a land dispute and community tension.
It's incredible, isn't it? Human geopolitics dictates his first steps, not his spiritual vision alone. It's the meeting point of the absolute and the practical.
His spiritual resolve was necessary.
But the external environment dictated where and how that resolve would be applied.
So Brainerd immediately set out for Conomeek, and he concludes the chapter with his arrival on March 31st at Mr. Sargent's house in Stockbridge. And that concludes his 4 months of intense preparation.
An incredible journey before the journey even began.
So what does this all mean for you, the well-informed learner? We've reviewed the core knowledge gained from this chapter, the intense emotional preparation that was necessary for a life of radical service.
And that preparation wasn't about building confidence.
No, it was about achieving this profound self-abnegation, the feeling that he was nothing but dust and ashes, which in turn generated an absolute, stable dependence on God.
Brainerd's diary is just such a powerful testament to critical self-examination. It illustrates the extreme demands of spiritual integrity he placed upon himself. His method teaches us that genuine service, in his view, has to flow from a position of acknowledged weakness.
Never from self-reliance.
Never. He intentionally sought to be weaned from a dependence on my frames, shifting his trust from his fleeting emotional state to the reliable character of the divine. And that's a powerful, albeit extreme, model of introspection for anyone facing a major life challenge.
It's a lesson in spiritual stability, really. Find the foundation that remains unshaken when all the external circumstances and all your internal feelings are constantly changing.
And this raises a final provocative thought for you, the listener. Brainerd conquered his internal conflicts. He achieved total spiritual submission. But the commissioners changed his mission based purely on external political and social constraints. Land disputes, community tension.
The messy real world.
Exactly. So how often does your own commitment to a higher purpose or maybe a strongly held personal plan need to be adapted or entirely rerouted because of immediate pragmatic and messy real-world constraints? And does that kind of intense internal preparation make us more flexible in the face of external ambiguity, or does it make us less flexible?
That intersection of internal resolve and external constraint, that is something worth mulling over. If you found this deep dive into the 18th century spiritual forge illuminating, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can continue your journey of knowledge with us.
We'd love to have you back.
Thank you for joining the deep dive.